are live. Dave Hime, welcome to my podcast. I'm very grateful you're on today. Thank you for taking the time. This is going to be a fun conversation.
I'm super honored, Jack. I'm super honored to be here. Thanks for asking me. Thanks for inviting me, he said, as a projector. Yeah.
Well, we got to dive deeper into what does that mean as a projector? What is human
Yeah.
design? What is gene keys? All these things. But
Yeah.
you are a very multi-dimensional person, both in what you do and you as a being. So can you tell the people listening a little intro on who you are and what it is you do?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Dave Hime, and I'm the general mastery guy. And so what I do is I work with consciousness and wealth aligned people who want to accelerate and then sort of maximize their journey to self-actualization. So I mean that kind of from the Maslow's hierarchy of needs point of view, where self-actualization is really like the highest potential. And it's the top of that, like after you manage sort of survival. And so the way I do this is using this method that I created called General Mastery that pulls from a lot of work I've done with the hierarchy of needs, with human design, which we can talk more about, with the gene keys, which we can talk more about, and then just dozens of other transformational traditions that I've learned throughout my own sort of travels in life. And it's called General Mastery because my own experience of trying to attain self actualization was typically done through the sort of hustle model and work harder model. And that never worked for me. So I wanted to create something that came from a new place and supported people's sort of spaciousness. Right. So that's what I do.
I love it. And I think this is why we're so connected and so resonant with each other is because, I mean, ever since I was as young as I could remember, I was obsessed with human potential,
Yeah.
always. And so
Yeah.
at first that took form in sports and sports video games, and it's evolved to first psychology, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then a little bit deeper into spirituality with like the 9 stages of ego development. But it's gone even further and further to like the depths of mysticism and esoteric spirituality, which maybe we can dive into here a little bit. But I was of the belief for a long time that reaching your potential just meant you have to work harder than everybody. And I think this is what can be somewhat misleading because the model I was taking that from was, let me look at Michael Jordan, the best basketball player of all time.
Mm,
What did he do
mm.
better than everybody else? He worked harder than everybody else. Kobe Bryant worked harder than everybody else. So can you talk to me a little bit about how that actually might not be the only way, especially in these more soft skill realms of self-actualization, where maybe working harder isn't the answer? How does that compare to gentle mastery? What's the difference?
Well, there are a couple of things I want to say about that now. And one of them is I have no doubt that the, you know, Steph Curry's and the Michael Jordans of the world, that along with going out there and standing at the free throw line, like I know zero about sports ball, so I'm just kind of making this up, but that along with going out and doing whatever their drills were to work harder and get better, that there were mental and sort of extra mental kinds of things that were going on with them that they just didn't talk about because for one thing, that esoteric side that you have been drawn to, it's it's very taboo in our culture still in some ways. um but to get back to your question, that hustle works for some people. It really, really does. Like, I've got a brother who is incredibly successful. He did it all from working harder than everybody else, right? And more power to him. He's now in his early 70s, I'll put it that way. And all he wants to do all day long is meditate. Because now that he doesn't have to spend all of his time working, he's able to actually acknowledge this softer, more needful part of himself because he wants to connect more deeply with himself. And that's what general mastery is about, right? It's about finding that deeper connection, because when you get a deeper connection with yourself, as opposed to always sort of having that part of your mind that's saying, go, go, go. Like, one of the reasons why we're here today talking about this is because I said something the other day about Neptune moving into Aries, right? And so I don't know if we're going to talk about that today or not, but the reason why I bring that up now is because we're have just moved into this period astrologically where Aries is like, let's effing go, right? And so that's what like got my brother to where he is with his 5 homes and his everything that he's got going on for him. More power to him. But now that he has stopped that work, all he wants is spaciousness, right? And spaciousness requires ease and gentility. That's what Neptune is, right? So right now we're in this place. We as a world are moving into this place because of this astrological transition or transit that's going to play out over the next 14, 15 years of this dichotomy between let's go and let's take it easy, right? And so I'm here for the people who need a way, whether or not the let's go has worked for them, right? Who need a way to go deeper, connect with themselves deeper, connect with source or spirit deeper, and connect with society deeper. Because the changes we're about to see happening in the world are going to require those people to step up and be leaders in ways that they never have been before, along with people like you and me.
Hmm. Most definitely. Yeah, I want to dive deeper into the astrological shifts and the ages that we're entering into. But I also want to dive deeper into how you dive deeper into your clients. So, where do you
Okay.
start with them, right? Do you start with their gene keys? Do you start with their human design? And yeah, what does that process look like?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of all of the above when it comes to somebody inviting me to work with them. And that usually has to do with the person, right? But what I know I'm going to base everything in is what they present with, like, as their burning issues in the moment. And then what the basics that I find useful with human design are, not the depth, the detailed human design stuff that a really gifted human design reader can give you. I'm not that person. Plus, what I understand through the person's gene keys that's going to relate to whatever it is they're asking about. Now, that's like when it's a situation where somebody is like saying, hey, Dave, do you mind taking a look at my stuff and letting me know what's going on in my life right now? I have sort of structured offerings through the general mastering method that look specifically at releasing unhelpful thoughts and beliefs, so you can achieve freedom, then sort of finding your ideal identity through meaning, and then through finding your aligned abundance, right? And so when somebody purchases one of those things, I'm looking at very specific gene keys for each of those things, because that's actually how I got from where I was with a bunch of suffering into where I am now with this sense of spaciousness and ease, was creating this process for myself and then living it. So,
Mm, mm. And for people that aren't as familiar with these branches of philosophy or
yeah.
explanations of self,
Yeah.
what is the difference between human design and the difference between human design and gene keys?
All right. So I'm going to start with a caveat here. I'm an autodidact. I am somebody who has learned through teaching himself, right? I've gone out there and found what I have needed to find. Am not a quote unquote trained human design or trained gene keys person. But so what I'm about to give you is my understanding of these two systems. Well, we won't go there yet. I have studied them enough to be able to have an answer. So human design has been around since the late 80s. And what it is it takes a combination of established sort of mystical traditions, the I Ching, the astrology, the Kabbalah, um, the chakra system, and combines it with quantum physics, quantum mechanics. Yeah, so it's this interesting melange of all of these things based on your birth date, birth time, and birth location. So astrology plays a very big factor in this. And what it is like a Myers-Briggs or a Clifton Strengths Finder personality profile on steroids. And it goes into a lot more than, let's say, your work style. It goes into how to make aligned decisions, like major decisions in your life. And for me, what it gave me was a sense of, when I saw sort of the top level of my human design information, it gave me a sense of being able to look back at my life and show where I was living in alignment with this information and where I was not. And when I could see that, it rang very true for me. So then the gene keys is sort of offshoot of that. The guy who created human design went by a name Ra Uruhu, and one of the first people who he had worked with him teaching human design is a really interesting guy named Richard Rudd. And Richard's from the UK, kind of trained as a like a poet. He's a wordsmith, and he was working with Ra. Ra's whole thing is, we're all going to have to deal with some very difficult stuff coming up. This also plays into the astrological thing that I was talking about, because there are changes happening in the planet and in humanity that human design predicts. But Ra's sort of point of view of it, from my understanding from Richard Rudd, was a little more glass half empty. And Richard was looking for a way to interpret this same information in a we're all going to be okay kind of point of view. And he had his own sort of mystical experience and download in which he took the same information that you get with a human design reading and mapped it onto our actual human genes, our genetics, which is why it's called the gene keys. I don't know about genetics, but what I do know is that when I first found out about human design, a lot of it really resonated with me, but it felt very complicated because it is a very deep, dense, multi-layered system. So for the right people, it is the right thing to go into. When I 6 months later found the gene keys, heard about the gene keys as an offshoot of human design in my study of human design, I bought the Gene Keys book. I read the Gene Keys book. I felt like I could have written it. It felt so aligned with what I already knew and how I already interpreted these various frequencies that we live at. If you're, like if you're familiar with Hawkins' work about the map of consciousness, like all of these different levels of consciousness, it maps directly onto that. And that makes a lot of sense to me. And so therefore I found it more useful in my work than human design was. But I use both.
Mm. Mm.
And the distinction there is really the point of view of the creator.
I see. See, these are two branches that I would love to dive deeper into. I have like such a little surface level understanding of, I'd say I know more about human design than gene keys I know a little bit based on what you told me about my gene keys, which was very insightful. But for human design, I digged in a little bit to my own, like being a manifesting generator. What does that mean? What's my emotional authority? How should I make decisions? There's been a few little subtle things that have actually been transformational. Like, this is strange, but the biggest insight I may have gotten from human design so far is that I thrive when I'm in external markets like a cafe or a city and I'm sitting in the corner. And every time now I go to a coffee shop or a party, even, I go dance in the corner. I go right in the corner. I go to a restaurant by myself. I sit in the corner and I just feel like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be in the commotion of people, but seeing everything. And I got that from a human design reading. So there's some really interesting nuanced things in these branches of philosophy. I've gravitated most towards astrology recently.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think it's because initially I just saw myself as somebody who was going to be a psychologist. I was really into Myers-Briggs because that's all I could see at the time. And then now that I've gotten into astrology, I'm like, wow, I really knew nothing about psychology. And I'm in the process of like becoming a makeshift astrologer. Like with my friends in college, I'm giving them mini readings. Like, and then people are so surprised when I can guess their sign. I'm like, oh yeah, you're probably a Cancer, right? Your girl's like, what? How could you figure that out? And it's really interesting to talk about these things with people that are in like normal society or normally like college kids, because
Yeah.
there's sometimes a big resistance. They're like, oh, I don't believe in that. I believe in God. That's like
Yeah.
a common response, which is very fascinating because I'm just like, no, this is just a manifestation of God. This is an explanation of God to understand yourself deeper. Um, but yeah, that's a bit of a tangent. I love this stuff. I could go into it all day, but I want to know a little bit more about these changes in humanity that are predicted from human design that align with these astrological times. So I know, and I've talked about this on previous podcasts, we're entering the age of Aquarius, right? More spirituality, more
Yep.
individuation, more power to the individual. But
Yep.
what else are they alluding to and talking about in human design specifically related to these astrological times?
Well, what's again going to start with, I'm not an expert on this particular topic, but um, did, I believe it was late last year, Richard Rudd gave a live talk that I saw streamed, um, that he was calling the 2027 prophecy. And the funny thing about it was, right off the bat, he's like, okay, I got you. I'm calling it the 2027 prophecy. So I got you here to pay attention to me because the word prophecy really sounds like I'm going to like really lay it out here for you. But all he wanted to talk about was the sort of truth that's coming up, that people who are awake and aware and sort of conscious are already aware of and feeling and experiencing in some way. And that is, so the specific human design 2027 prediction. Human design takes our um, entire history as humans on the planet and breaks it up into roughly 400-year epochs. And those 400-year epochs correspond to what in human design is called an incarnation cross. Everybody has this thing called an incarnation cross. It's not a huge deal. It can be very affirming to find out what yours is. Mine was very affirming, but it's basically the position of the sun and the moon at the time that you were born and at 88 degrees prior to the time you were born. And those four, what in human design are called gates, but in gene keys are called gene keys. They're exactly the same things. Um, Determine what an individual's incarnation cross is. This incarnation cross is an energy, and the energy also applies to the 400-year epoch that we're talking about. So each of these epochs has its own incarnation cross. We are coming out of a 400-year period that human design calls the cross of planning. And so the sort of highlights of this cross of planning are creating structure. It's very tribal oriented. I mean, what they want you to do when human design people talk about this is they want you to think back to, okay, early 1600s, what were the changes going on the planet and in society in general, but then also in governments, in um, economic structures, any of those kinds of things that were going on, those things were all ushered in by this cross of planning, right? So a lot of governmental creation happened at that time, at least the first phases of some of it, because we're going to talk about what's going on with that coming up. And it was all intended to be able to take humans and put us into organized systems, so to speak. And that's the whole tribal aspect of it. I mean, you can think of the United States of America as a tribe, right? And we're a tribe that's separate from our neighbors Canada and our neighbors Mexico and all the other tribes around the world. And we have our set of structures and they have their set of structures. And these, while there's some crossover or some similarities, this is what the incarnation cross of planning for the last 400 years has brought us. The 2027 is the beginning of a new incarnation cross, the beginning of a new 400-year epic. And that's the cross of the sleeping phoenix. And the cross of the sleeping phoenix, as I understand it, is all based on the individual. So it's no longer tribal, it's individual. It is a set of human design gates. I'm saying that each of these crosses apply to 4 particular gates in 4 particular places that tell us that the structures that we've been living with, the governmental structures, the societal structures, the economic, the environmental structures, are going to collapse. And I don't mean that in any kind of an alarmist kind of a way. It's just the evolution, right? The evolution of mankind. And this will be a big evolution of mankind. And it is supported by this Age of Aquarius conversation that you were saying about the age of the individual, the rise of creativity, the rise of a collective consciousness, right? With the cross of the sleeping phoenix, it's literally the rise, right?
Mhm.
So we're coming out of the ashes of this destruction that's going to happen over a fairly lengthy period of time. I mean, 400 years is a long time. And so we're beginning to see and have begun to see over the last couple of decades changes in how governments work, what's going on ecologically, all those kinds of things, like, something as simple yet devastating as the fires in California. And there are many, many, many examples of these kinds of things. These are examples of our ecology system reorganizing, changing. And so we as humans are not immune to these changes either. So human design says we need to be ready because this is going to be traumatic and we need to steel ourselves for this trauma. What Richard Rudd was talking about in his 2027 prophecy is, yes, these kinds of changes will cause trauma. That's part of what's being predicted here, but it will also allow the people who are part of this consciousness collective, like I said a minute ago, even people who have gotten here because they have really hit it really hard all their lives, but now they're looking for a deeper connection. The reason behind the fact that they're looking for a deeper connection is they have a role to play as leaders when what we start to do is rely much more deeply on each other and bring our individual strengths and our individual understandings of what binds us together as divine beings in human bodies into this epic. Did that
Wow.
help?
Yes. I was immersed in everything you were saying. And my follow-up question there is, okay, this change is going to happen. We're seeing it happening. You can also see it with decentralization of money with Bitcoin. You could
Yep.
see it with a collective awakening of more and more young people who are open and aware of these ideas and their nature as spiritual beings, which can be quite jarring when you find out very abruptly, very young. Speaking from experience,
Yeah.
only in the last few years have I even become aware of that topic. So yeah, it's becoming more clear and obvious that a shift is happening, right? People are talking about decentralization. They're talking about the new earth. They're talking about the fifth dimension, all these crazy things. What do you see as ways that individuals listening to this podcast can best prepare themselves for this shift?
That's a great question. I think it's about opening yourself up to spaciousness, which is a topic that I talk a lot about these days. Um, and what I mean by that is finding ways to accept that we're all just in our day-to-day lives experiencing multiple facets of ourselves in multiple ways, right? And so that actually sounds almost like the opposite of spaciousness, but bear with me here for a minute. Um, something else that has become more of a topic of sort of everyday conversation among a lot of people is shadow work, right? And so we all are starting to accept the fact that, like Jung said, we have shadow sides, right? And that is an important aspect of both human design and the gene keys. Again, it's like the map of consciousness as well, right? So we all have lower frequency responses to what life gives us, and we all have mid frequency responses, and we all have high frequency responses. So the best way to prepare yourself for this is to understand all of that spectrum of what's going on with you, and do your best to get out of what we are conditioned to do, which is to resist or ignore the shadow side or the lower frequency responses in ourselves, and start to see the lessons that are there for us. Because this is what the gene keys teach. And this is what I fervently believe, because I've experienced it for myself, and everybody I've ever worked with has experienced it. Once you understand what that shadow is, and you can accept it fully, that it's just part of you, the power that it has over you disappears. And you're able to go through that shadow. It's that great quote of the only way out is through. You're able to go through that shadow and out of it into a strength that you've got, right?
Mm.
Because every shadow is one side of a coin, and the other side of the coin is a gift. And I use the words challenge and strength. So everything that challenges you in your life, that just keeps happening over and over and over again, whether it's financial challenges or relationship challenges or whatever they are, they're here to teach you the lessons about your strength. And so the best way to be prepared for any kind of traumatic experience is to understand where your responses to what's happening come from, and how to flow with that, how to bring spaciousness to your thinking about that, how to allow all of those sides, allow yourself to experience all of those sides, because that's how you stop. The thing that you resist is the thing that persists. So if you're resisting that shadow response, that low frequency response, that response is going to hang on for dear life. And any kind of modern or ancient mysticism, or just technology of psychology, right, is going to tell you that. We need to start paying attention to that, and we need to start living our lives understanding that about ourselves and each other, which means giving ourselves so much grace, being very gentle with ourselves, and doing the exact same thing for the people in our lives and the people we see every day. I mean, that's the whole point of gentle mastery, is develop that self-compassion that it takes to allow yourself to love yourself enough to see yourself as that wave of the ocean of God and divine universal energy, and then start to see that in the people that you're talking to, because they are just as much that as you are. And that's how we thrive through this.
Mm, mm. Just very well said. Now,
I'm long-winded, so I hope everybody's
that's
ready to strap
perfect.
in, right?
I mean, it makes my job as the podcaster pretty easy. I just ask a question and I'm like, okay, just you got this. Look,
Self-projecting projector, yeah.
I want to go deeper into that. What does it mean? But first, I want to go deeper into maybe a tangible example of either yourself or a client doing shadow work and actually transforming or transmuting a shadow into a strength. Like, what does that look like in an example? Because I think that can help crystallize it in people's minds and my mind as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll use myself as an example because I am my oldest living client. And that is,
That's
so
good.
in my gene keys, I have four, like everybody does, these four primary gene keys. And each of those has a shadow side. Each of those has a gift side. Each of those has what Richard calls a FIDDI, FIDDHI side. I call them challenge, strength, and ultimate potential, right? And the core one I have is mediocrity. So mediocrity it's actually not one of my primary four, but in the gene keys, you have something called your core wound, and it's the thing that you are born with. So it is the thing that you are here karmically to work through. And my core wound is gene key 8, and it's the shadow frequency or the challenge frequency of mediocrity, right?
Mm,
And so now I'm going to really challenge myself to off the cuff remember what the strength frequency of that is. Oh, it's something called style, which Richard uses some really interesting words. They don't necessarily mean what you think they mean. So it's worth like diving into his actual written work about this. Style in this instance means um, coming into your own self, like recognizing and getting comfortable with yourself as you are. It's that sort of self-acceptance thing, right? And when you do that, when you recognize that that is your gift or your strength, then you're able to be 100% who you are. And the reason why you haven't been being 100% who you are is because of this shadow side of mediocrity, because our conditioning and our world that we live in, the way that things are set up is there are the few Michael Jordans, right? There are the few stars, the few people who have this personal style, who like you can say a name like Michael Jordan and everybody, like, I don't know a damn thing about basketball, but I know that he's like one of the best basketball players ever. You immediately associate him with something, and that something that you associate with him with, or any of these people who are a household name, can be described as their style. They are so comfortable in themselves and just being themselves and showing up as this magnificent version of themselves. And there's this sensation that we all have that's not true, that only certain people have that. And if you've got gene key 8, then you feel like you are intended to just live your life in as much of a mediocre way as you possibly can, right? Because that's the shadow side of this. And so mediocrity is accepted, right? We say that it's not good to be mediocre, but everybody who's a cog in a wheel at a job is staying a cog in a wheel in that job because they demonstrate mediocrity as a human being. They're not going to like be at the top of the heap, right? Because that means showing up as you really are. And so in my world, an actual usable example of transforming the shadow of mediocrity into the gift of style has everything to do with creating the guidance practice that I have now. I was stuck in a job that I thought was going to be the thing that would finally allow me to say, my parents were right, society was right. Find the right job. It'll be what you need. It's going to take care of you. Life is going to be good. And this was the perfect job for that. It was one of about 5 perfect jobs for that I've had throughout my life. I thought this was going to be the one. And what I found was what they needed me to do is be just as freaking mediocre as they were. Right. So every day I would wake up trying to figure out how can I give them what they want. And every time I did that, I was pushing down my own gifts of being uniquely me, right? I was trying to fit into their mediocre box, where my gift of style is about being uniquely me. So when I decided I was going to make this transition from working for someone to having my own practice, everything I've done about that has been, how does this show me at my best? Not from a sort of what's the word I want to use? Surface point of view, but how do I show up completely myself and completely comfortable in my own skin? Because that's what style is all about, right? And so it's been um, one of the key reasons why my practice has just zoomed from the very beginning is because it reflects uniquely who I am.
Mm. Another beautiful response. You have me introspecting, and I don't know if I have gene key 8. Maybe you remember. Do I? I don't
I
think so.
don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
I can look up your chart, but yeah,
That's okay. I'll take a look after. I
yeah,
don't think I had it, but I could be wrong. But I mean, you even have me thinking about what's my style. Like
yeah,
what do I want to be, when people say Jack Moses, like what is the thing
yeah,
that I want to be known for? The word that keeps popping in my head is just swagger, confidence, but also like a grounded way, right? Not like a boastful
right,
cockiness, but like
right.
a cool, composed swagger with a deep understanding and deep ability to see. And I hope everybody out there that's listening when Dave was talking, and if not, go back 5 minutes and rewind. Think about like what is your unique swagger? What's your unique style? Because we all have that unique flavor, that unique flair. And that's what people love about you individually. They love you operating in your most authentic, self-expressive way, right? You don't want to be described by somebody as like, oh, what do you think about Dave? What do you think about Jack? Oh, he's just a nice guy. He's a cool guy,
Yeah,
right? No, Dave, oh, he's fascinating. He's like a wizard. Like he's into gene keys and human design, and he's also a psychic. This dude is so cool, right? And so by you choosing to not go the mediocre path, now you have people talking about you in a way that is aligned with your true self and your true style.
that was said really, really well, Jack. Yeah, and it's absolutely true. And whether or not you've got a particular gene key that shows up in your, whole genetic profile, which is what they call the gene key reading, everybody has aspects of all 64 gene keys as part of their makeup because they connect into what our genetics, our DNA are, and you're carrying your ancestors' DNA with you. So even if you don't have gene key 8 or whatever the particular gene key is that we happen to be talking about, somebody in your lineage has had it. So it still is activated within you. And even if it's not, when the planets are in a particular place, it gets activated, right?
Mm.
So that's a really, really great point, which is, anybody who feels stuck having to live a mediocre life or oh, he's a nice guy kind of response, you have the opportunity to think about what Jack just said. It's like, what is your swagger? What is your style? And again, not from I'm going to show off kind of a way, or a boastful or condescending kind of a way, but in who am I really? Right. And that can be challenging for people, because we're all basically taught to some extent two things. You can be anything you want to be when you grow up, and don't be any of this kind of stuff, right? So, and all of that is intended to help us survive, and all of that does help us survive. But there comes a point in your life where it is your responsibility, if you so choose, to question all of those beliefs, right? And it's when you are able to understand which ones are actually aligned with who you are and which ones aren't, that's when you can start to find your swagger. That's what I would say for you, Jack. You really started to find that when you started going on your sort of what I call your walkabout, right? It's like when you left to try to find what the world had for you, right? That put
Mhm.
you in touch with your swagger. And that's, I don't know your life story in terms of growing up, but my guess is that that's not something that's traditional in your family, to just like leave college and go to Thailand or wherever it is, right? And so it's not like you were taught that that's a part of the natural process, that self-discovery thing, right? I certainly wasn't taught the stuff that I'm most aligned with, but that doesn't negate the wonderful people who taught me what they taught me, or any of those things that they did teach me that I am aligned with. So none of this is intended to say, I'm right, you're wrong. It's all intended to say, we all have the opportunity to really discover what makes us each so great. We're already creating our own reality every minute of every day. So you might as well do it from knowing who you are and what the reality is that you want to create.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you sent me down a little mental rabbit hole of going back to the first time I traveled. And what's coming through for me right now is, to find out who you are, sometimes you have to forget everything you've ever been. And so up to this point, this is 3 years ago, about 3 summers ago. Um, yeah, I was 20 and I had just done a finance internship, and I was on a college football team, but I was quitting at the time. It was retiring because of my knee. And I remember thinking to myself around that time many times, like, I like not have a personality? Like, I don't know who I am, because I had only been who I thought other people wanted me to be my whole life unconsciously. So I was the athlete, and that's still a part of me. I'm an athlete again. That's always going to be a part of me. But why was I even doing a finance internship in the first place? It was like what
Right.
everybody else wanted for me. And so it was only until I abandoned that and entered a period of spaciousness, as you talked about, of 2 months in Europe, no agenda, with one friend. I could be anybody I wanted. I just somehow end up getting a yin yang tattoo within the first 5 days there. Oh, I start to grow my hair a little bit. I start wearing a bandana, like these different things that I never would have allowed myself to do. And of course, they came with resistance. And now, I mean, I'm still discovering who I am, but I'm like fusing these two sides of athlete, disciplined, structured businessman with hippie, spiritual, open minded, right? And so that only came from creating the space, forgetting everybody I knew what they told me I should be, and then discovering it through the spaciousness, and then deepening in that understanding through study of psychology, astrology, human design, gene keys. That's like
Yeah.
the layer on top.
Yeah, well, and it all goes together. And what you just said, where you've got this side of you that is this person, and then this side of you that is this person. That's another aspect of this change that's coming up. That's another aspect of what so many people who are looking for guidance around deepening their connection with themselves. One of the reasons why they're doing that is because we have always revered the left brain, analytical, finance guy part of ourselves. That's just part of the culture in the West. And we're all, well, for the most part in the West, raised to believe that success comes from doing well in a sort of a left brain dominated field, right? But those of us who are getting connected to the mystical, the metaphysical, the multisensory realities of the world, the divine self, are activating the right hemisphere of the brain, right? And
Mhm.
so what's actually beginning to happen is the two hemispheres of the brain are beginning to talk to each other. So that barrier between them, and this is true for everybody, whether or not you're aware of the experience that you're happening, that you're having, this is part of this transition to the new human that this 2027 beginning of the 400-year epoch is predicting, and that we know is happening for ourselves and many other people, is these two different parts of us are starting to merge and to meld. And it's like it's possible to be an amazing creator somehow through a job in finance, right? And vice versa. It's somehow possible to understand numbers through being an artist. And that's the new human, right?
Mm.
So we're not segmented into, well, here are the brainiacs, and then here are the, woo-woo people, right? We're all both things, and we've
Right.
always all been both things, but it's been for the health and welfare of the tribes that have been created, these nations that have been created, that certain strengths have been um, sort of lifted up, right? And our other strengths, which we're just as strong at, have been sort of suppressed.
Mm. Yeah, what's coming through for me is like what a blessing it is to be alive at this time to witness this transformation. It's like I don't know how you feel about this, but I do feel that reincarnation is quite real and we've had many past lives. And how many lives have we lived through where the opportunities have not been so abundant, where the earth was not shifting to this new astrological age? It's an absolute blessing. And sometimes I think because we're still in the early stages of this shift, going on the spiritual path or like deepening into the right hemisphere of your brain or the woo-woo side or the open-minded hippie side, it seems scary and it seems like there's less security because I'm 23, and so most of my friends from high school all just graduated college, and most of them have these finance jobs, like high-paying finance jobs. And so on the surface, they're getting paid pretty well. They have security. And there's me who has been an entrepreneur, very mystical, very spiritual, and doesn't have that security. And sometimes the doubt comes in, the worry is like, am I doing the right thing? Should I just do what everybody else is doing? But, I think there's an integration of it. I think it's like, how can we still play in this world that is currently constructed and society that's currently constructed, but be open enough to the eventual evolution that is imminent and going to take place in the next 10, 20 years? And if you're not open to these ideas now and you don't open to them, you're going to be very unprepared for the shift that's going to happen.
Right, exactly. And the answer to the question I think you're asking, even though you didn't phrase it as a question, is the people who are the who are going into their careers in finance, as things develop over the next couple of decades, they're going to start to come face to face with this stuff, right? And if they're not as prepared, they can think, oh, remember Jack Moses, when he went through that hippie phase and all that stuff, he understands my world, but he also understands this other things going on. Let me find out what the heck he's doing, right? So there's sort of where there's your playing field, as it were, right? For bringing the two things together, in that you understand both sets of realities that still show up in most people's thinking as two separate sets of realities, right?
Mm.
So it's kind of like me, like my version of that is my years and years and years of always being like one person away from, like at one point, the CEO of the largest healthcare company in the world, right? And then at, you know, many, many times, because my original professional life was in performance, like so many now, like Oscar winners and Tony winners and Grammy winners were people who crashed on my sofa when we were all in college, right? And so there's a reason why we have proximity to the aspects of ourselves that we were taught to be. It's so that we will understand the world of the person who then needs our guidance when it comes to their time to say, oh, like my brother, like when it comes to his time to say, all I want to do is meditate, right? Like I can sit down and have a conversation with him about his gene keys, and he can find out just how aligned he is with his meditative self or whatever it is he wants to know, right? So, but he was the CEO guy in all of his businesses. I understand that mindset because I always work with those people. So
Mm.
that's the answer to the question.
Mm. Incredible. I think I have to connect you with an astrologer who's coming to mind for me right now. And this guy, absolute wizard. His name's Michael Norse. I want to get him on the podcast at some point. He's a Vedic astrologer, so it's different than Western. So I don't know
Right.
everything he talks about. But the first thing he ever suggested to me was you should go get a job and work in finance. And I was like, what? Fuck off. I was like, that's fucking crazy. No way. And he's like, well, you need to fund your Hogwarts education somehow.
Thank
That's
you.
what he said.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
he's like, you can, be in Goldman Sachs or whatever you want to be in. And then just on the weekends, go do your spiritual retreats and bring the people from that world to this world. Now, I don't think I want to do that. I really don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Time will tell what happens, but I don't think that is the path. But I've been proven wrong many times. I never thought I'd be playing football again. So we shall see. But yeah, there's something to be said about this idea of bridge building.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and he's absolutely right. We have the gifts that we have, but we still live on the material plane, right? So that means that if you're going to go out there and this is true for anybody who happens to be watching or listening to this, and you're getting in touch with your own abilities, right? You are meant to have whatever it is that you're here to, whatever gifts you're here to share with the world, right? The only way to do that is if you are adequately taken care of materially, right? So, like, I think that maybe your guy was maybe speaking a little bit metaphorically when he said, go get a job in finance. I mean, he may have not meant it literally, but what he means is there, keep in mind that you will need to use whatever talents you can to manifest the abundance that you need in order to bring your actual gifts to the world. And that's true for all of us, right? So,
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Yeah, and that has been a process for me recently as being very in the 3D world, like working a finance internship, making a bunch of money in the initial stage of the creator economy, just teaching about content and stuff, and
yeah.
now transitioning to much more metaphysical things has been okay. And I had this conversation yesterday with a friend. Like my upper chakras are very open and spinning very well, but my lower chakras have not been so firmly planted into the ground. And so can you be firmly planted in the material world, secure, abundant, and open your third eye and your crown to become one with God? That's my path right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's what you're here to discover at the moment, right? And so then your discovery process will then allow you to then, go out and teach others about it if that's what you're called to do, right? And this is also a part of why we need so many of us who can be a part of this consciousness, this conscious community, and this, conscious creator community, because we each have different aspects of the problem. It's like the old parable about the blind man and the elephant, right? We're all feeling a different part of this reality. So it may feel different to us, but there are those of us out there whose calling is to help us have the material needs met, right? So that we can do this. I don't know if you can hear my dogs barking in the background, but
A little
yeah,
bit.
yeah. So yeah, all of that is to say that there's a definite need for those of you who are watching or listening right now who are called to do material work in support of the more metaphysical stuff that some of the other ones of us are doing. And what's really great about that is then the reciprocity is amazing, because then if you want to learn more about yourself, you invest in the teachings from your favorite guide that you get called to, right? And so you're getting what you need and they're getting what they need, and this is where we're going, right? It becomes less and less about a structure in which we have to live, like the government and the school system and the whatever, and more about people helping people.
Mm. The consciousness economy is what's
That's
coming to my mind.
exactly it. That's
Yeah,
exactly it.
I think that's emerging, and we're living in it. You're living in
Yeah.
it. You are a member of the consciousness economy, which is so
Yeah.
cool. So I want to know about this because somebody like you who worked in corporate type of environments for their whole life, now you transition and you're fully owning this new identity as guide, reader, spiritual teacher, psychic, whatever it is, right? How was that transition for you, and how could somebody open up to that part of themselves and feel free enough to share it with the world? Because there's a lot of closet psychic, closet mystic types out there. So how did you open and become comfortable and embodied enough to share that with the world?
So I had been struggling. My struggle, we all have struggles. My struggle was financial, and it had been a struggle of mine all of my life after a certain age when, after being supported by my family, they chose no longer to financially support me. That's very ancient history. Um, and it was while I was in college. So I dropped out of college in order to start to support myself. And this was in the late 1970s. So anybody want to get out their calculator? Um, and that financial struggle never went away. And one of the reasons why it never went away is because I was very bought into the belief system that I had been brought up in the 1960s and early 1970s, which is graduate from high school, go to college, make good grades, get a good job, and you're set for life. And we all know that that system doesn't exist anymore. And I happen to be at the forefront of the group of people for whom most of us it did not exist for. So I, interestingly enough, kept having invitations provided to me to say, okay, that's not going to work for me. I do need to go and activate my more spiritual side, the part of me that is here to lead other people through my particular gifts, right? that kept coming up over and over and over and over and over again for decades in my life. And I kept sticking a toe in the water, finding out about it, and then saying, no, I need to, I don't know how I can make a living doing this. I need to go do this other thing. Right. And so what finally happened for me was I got introduced to human design once I decided that this most recent job that I had taken, which was almost exactly 8 years ago now, that was once again not going to be the one. Um, Once I decided that I couldn't stay there any longer. And so I'm now looking at maybe 3 years ago. I was 5 years into this job, and I went on a path trying to find out what it was about finances that wasn't working for me. And I um, wound up reading a book by Jen Sincero called You Are a Badass at Making Money. And the funny thing about Jen, I've now worked with her as my coach. Um, the funny thing about Jen is that word badass is really her way of saying God, right? So her stuff is very tongue in cheek, and her stuff is very funny. I mean, she was part of a rock band growing up, and actually a punk band called Crotch. It's funny, very funny. And she's basically saying, when she says you're a badass, she's saying you're a divine being, right, in a human body, right? So I read her stuff about manifesting money, and it made sense to me, but it didn't connect with me on a level where I was able to get over my fear enough to have enough faith in the fact that we're all here creating our own realities, so we might as well create them however it is we want to, right? And I was so busy and so tied into that belief that if I couldn't do it the way I was taught to do it, then I was going to fail, and I wasn't going to be successful, and I wasn't going to have the money, right? That even her book, which came at me from a level of, yeah, you really are able to create this, it I just kept going back to it, and it just never connected to me until summer of 2023. I was on a vacation. I was sitting in a coffee shop on the first morning of that vacation, and I had learned about human design. I had started learning about the gene keys. I knew I was going to have to leave this job. I had been trained for, it's coming up on 9 years now as a life coach. I thought I'm going to have to figure out how to be a life coach. Nobody really wants to hire a life coach anymore. What the hell am I going to do? And I'm sitting there in this coffee shop at my favorite place in the world, which is Provincetown, Massachusetts. And the guy at the table next to me, who I did not know, was speaking to his friend. And he said, I'm finally living life on my own terms. And I heard him say that. And that's when everything came together for me. Somehow, just those 8 words, I'm finally living life on my own terms, opened all of this up to me. I was able to say to myself, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I want to be able to say. That's the reality I want to be able to create. And I understand what's going on with my human design. I understand where those shadows lie that are getting in my way. I understand my gene keys. I've got the formula right here in Jen Sincero's book. I went home after that vacation, and I decided, if I'm going to start a business and change my life, and I'm going to go from being that guy who keeps failing at corporate stuff. I wasn't failing. It's not my design, not aligned with me, never was supposed to do any of that. Um, if I was going to change and do my own thing, I was going to need to hire somebody. I was going to need to hire a coach or a guide myself to help me out. And the first place I looked was Jen Sincero's website, and she had openings for a group, the first group she was doing in 5 years, first live group she was doing. And I went out and got a credit card because I didn't have the money to pay for the course. And I got in her course, and you know my story. Like 6 months later, I had somebody called me and gave me over $300,000, which was the money that I needed to be able to leave the job and start my business and take care of the mountains of debt and the deferred maintenance on my home and all of the things that had, piled up that were the things that before this were all I could focus on. And so since what you focus on expands, I was creating more and more and more and more and more of that crazy stuff, but that crazy bad stuff. But 6 months of having stronger faith that the universe has my back and is here for me to live my truth and help other people through doing that was all it took for everything to turn around. And the minute that happened, I was like, nope. As soon as the major project with this business is done, I'm saying sayonara. And that was 6 months ago. And when that happened, I was in the midst of training with another coach at that point, Nick. And literally, like that day that I left, he helped me create the containers for my business to get some offerings out there so I could get some income coming in. And within a month, I had 6 clients, right? So all like the magic 8 ball, all signs point to yes, right? So that was what was going on in my world. And it was this one partially overheard conversation that was the thing that made me make the life-changing decision, made me say, this is what resonates for me. I want to live life on my own terms, finally. And the penny dropped, and I was Aries. Let fucking go.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Wow. Isn't it incredible how God can give us exactly what we need as long as we're listening and open to it? Because you did not know going into that coffee shop this realization was going to happen, but you were open and aware enough to listen and receive it. And timing of all this is really interesting. I want to go into your manifestation of this $300,000 story quickly, but a little quick tangent. So when you started talking about this book, You Are a Badass at Making Money. I haven't read it, though I think I'm supposed to. And I think I'm supposed to because before I hopped in this podcast, I was doing my sauna cold plunge thing. And I go back into the sauna after the cold plunge, and usually I get some crazy visions. I get super clear. And I'm standing there meditating and like doing a mudra essentially. And a picture of a guitar, Atari, pops in my head. I'm like, what? I don't really know what this means. Okay. And it just clicked for me now because you just said this girl is like a rock star. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's the connection. So I'm supposed to read that book. Another little thing with the timing of when you find the right thing, you go on the website and it just happens to be happening. That happened to me today too. So I had a reading this morning with a psychic named Suzette Shannon. I think Suzette, yeah. She's incredible. She's been on James Anders' podcast. I'm going to get her on this podcast soon. And one of the big things we talked about at the end was responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Responsibility. Yeah. And this morning, before that reading, I wake up and I get a vision in my mind's eye of Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. So I'm like, oh, that was one of the most pivotal books in the start of my entire personal development psychology journey. And I was feeling the call to read it the other day. And I was like, okay, it's time for me to reread this book. And so I'm driving to the gym, to the sauna today. And I throw on a Jordan Peterson little 10-minute clip about responsibility. And I'm like, wow, this guy's such a good speaker. I've been to his speaking event. I wonder if he's speaking in Chicago anytime soon. I check. His next speaking event is in Chicago next Wednesday. And I'm going to go with my dad. And it got rescheduled until next Wednesday. And I'm like, this is the timing of things, right? We can't explain it, but something is happening astrologically that brought me to this realization now where I go check Jordan Peterson, boom, speaking in Chicago, April 16th, and I'm going to go. And it's magic. It's really magic what we're living in.
It's divine timing. It's synchronicity. Right. And that comes to anybody who is open enough to receive it. Right. It's happening all the time to everybody. But we're so trapped in our own little worlds, which not your fault. if you're trapped in your own little world. But there are ways out of that.
Not
I'm
your
one of
fault,
them.
but it's your responsibility.
Exactly. Absolutely. That's exactly it, right? And so just lift your head up. Just take a minute, take a breath. It The miracles happen in the pauses between whatever's going on in your life, right?
Hmm.
And that pause can be a stoplight on your way to work, or it can be an intake of breath while you're sitting at your desk or, meditating, right? And so those are the opportunities we have, and we have literally hundreds of them every day to connect with who we really are and allow that universal divine intelligence to come to us and give us what we're asking for. And we can ask for whatever we can ask for Jordan Peterson in Chicago, and it happens.
Right. Right. Incredible. Incredible. So I think this would be a good place to wrap it up with your story of manifesting $300,000. So how does that happen?
It still makes me giggle. So, yeah, so Jen Sincero, I'm in her group, and this is fall of 2023. I've come home from that vacation where I heard somebody say, I'm finally living life on my own terms. And Jen is the person from whom I learned, and you will learn from her book when you read it, that we're all here with our divine gifts, and we're all here for a reason. And you can find out what your reason is. And it can be to be the world's best grandmother, or it can be to be yeah, Tony Robbins. I don't know. You name it. President of the United States, whatever it is that, is sort of like in your mind, kind of diametrically opposed from the world's best grandmother. You can find your purpose. Once you find your purpose, one of the things that Jen teaches is then you need to map out what a day in the life of you living fully in that purpose looks like. And once you've got that clear in your mind, and you've created your vision board, or you've done whatever it is that you've done to make sure that you've got all the pieces in place, you start putting actual numbers to what it's going to take for you to get there. And the reason why you need to do that is because, like we were talking about earlier, we live in a material world. Everybody needs to eat. Everybody needs to wear clothes. Everybody needs to have a roof over their head, right? And that's just not going to like magically happen. And well, unless that's what you decide to manifest, right? And so once you've got your number in mind, then what you do is clear out all thoughts of how it's going to happen. Because we're not in control with how it happens that Jordan Peterson's going to be in Chicago next Wednesday. But we are in control of what we do with our thoughts and beliefs, and where we put our faith versus our fear. Get clear about it, be with it, um, think about it every day, find time to visualize this, feel it. And one of the most important things is get emotionally connected to this life. And I think that was the key of that, overhearing that guy say, I'm finally living life on my own terms. That's what gave me the emotional connection to this. It's like it hit me so emotionally. So I'm in this class with her. We finished the class. So at this point, it's like November of 2023. And my number is $300,000, because I know I've got 6 figures worth of debt to pay off. I've got 18 years worth of deferred maintenance to deal with my house. My husband's been driving the same pickup truck for the last 20 years, and I've got this job that is making ends meet. And I need to the way I pictured it is I needed to create a runway, a financial runway that would allow me to, when it was time, leave that job, do it with integrity, right? And have enough time so that I could create whatever it was I was creating. So all I'm doing in November, December, and January 2023 to 2024 is I'm studying the gene keys because I'm also figuring out my own method. I'm figuring out whatever this thing is that I'm then going to be able to guide people through. And what I recognize through working with Jen and some other people, and then looking at my gene keys, is it's all about getting free of those limiting beliefs that are holding you back. James Clear teaches us it's not what you do is based on what your identity is. Everything you do is a vote for who you are. That's a James Clear quote, right? So another piece to this puzzle for me was, who am I when I am this person who Jen helped me create the vision of? Because it can't be the guy who's stuck in this job, right? And then the third thing is, and this is key to Richard Rudd's Gene Keys work, we're here to receive individual abundance through helping provide prosperity to the collective, to all of humanity, right? So I was figuring out how to look at my gene keys to get the answers to these three things for myself and to use that to build it to help other people get that answer. And the whole time I was doing that, I was also doing my daily process of thinking about my 300,000. Now, what I'm not doing is I'm not worrying about how it's going to happen, but I'm doing everything I can to create ways that I can monetize my gifts, because you can't just sit back and expect it to just magically occur. You also have to take aligned, intentional actions, right? And the other thing I'm not doing is I'm not really sharing this with anybody. Like, I told my best friend that I had this going on. I didn't tell her what the number was. I told my husband I had this going on. I didn't tell him what the number was because it seems crazy. Like, it seems ridiculous. It's like, okay, easiest way to get somebody to laugh at me and say, oh, he's that crazy $300,000 guy, is for me to share this information with them, right? And that's not something I'm going to do, because I am fully fixated in my faith over fear with all of this. So end of January, we're almost at the end of the story. End of January 2024, a relative who never ever calls me. She and I text. We're very close. We text a lot. She hates the phone. She never uses the phone. The only time she ever calls me is with bad news. She calls me and I look at the phone and I go, oh gosh, did somebody die? And answered the phone. She said, okay, everything's fine. I'm fine. Nobody's dead. And I'm calling you for a reason that I've never called you for before. And I'm going to tell you something that I've never told you before. But I have, over the years, amassed some money. And I've realized that I have far more money than I need to live. And I just saw a headline in the Wall Street Journal that said, if you're planning on leaving money to anybody after you die, give it to them now if you can, and let them enjoy it. And I thought about you and the other people in my life who I thought I would surprise with money after my death. And I'm not going to tell you what you're getting. I'm just calling you to tell you. Another person's going to call you. He's going to ask you for your bank information and all the other information that he would need in order to transfer money into your bank account. I love you, bye. And she hangs up.
Wow.
And so the guy calls that day. I give him my information that day. 5 days later, and this is no freaking joke, there's a deposit in my checking account for $333,333.33.
Wow.
And my bank thought it was fake. My bank held on to it and was like, nope, we got to check this out, because this is not anything that's ever happened in Dave's account before. Plus, it's all these threes. This can't be right. And so, like, then that was when I was really like, oh gosh, maybe this isn't real. Maybe it's all going to disappear in the 2 days that the bank was holding on to it. So it was one more test of faith. But what it taught me more than anything else is this shit works.
I'm I'm kind of speechless. Honestly, I don't know what to say other than it's just magic. It's just pure magic. And people might be like, "Oh, you just got lucky," like blah blah blah.
You
But
didn't do anything for it. Yeah, you didn't earn that. Yeah, I've heard it all. But the reality is that I had been stuck with this need for so long and in the fear of it for so long that it took gigantic mindset shifts, try to say that, and believing in myself and believing in my own
Mhm.
divinity in a way that I never have before. And the proof is in the pudding because now I'm living the life that I was visualizing when I was working with Jen.
Wow. I mean, it's just incredible. And I mean, the rational mind is going to try to explain how does this happen? And my explanation would be you committed to operating at such a certain frequency where you were sending such specific thought energy out into the universe that that creates a ripple effect because there's really no separation between you and your relative. That
That's exactly
somehow
right.
cosmically shifted her perception of reality to the realization of giving it to you. That's
That's
my
exactly right.
explanation.
I mean, it was God speaking to her through the Wall Street Journal. You know, I
Mhm.
mean, like, what can I say? Uh, That's as rational an explanation as I have. I mean, and I know we're wrapping up, but the message, the most important message from any of this is possible for you too, no matter who you are, whether you're Jack, whether you're somebody watching or listening to this. It all has to do with those three things: letting go of the limiting beliefs, figuring out who you are, and having every single thought and action be a vote for becoming that person, and then getting aligned with where abundance really comes from. All kinds of prosperity and abundance come from you serving your highest good
Mhm.
and the highest good of others.
Mhm. I mean, my biggest takeaway is I'm gonna go download that book ASAP, and I'm gonna link it below for anybody as well.
That's
Like,
great. Yeah. Yeah. I think I listened to it 5 or 6 times before that penny dropped. So, it may be instantaneous for you or it may not be, but it's a beautiful blueprint
it sounds like it.
and funny as hell. So
It's incredible. What a story. What a story. So we didn't dive super deep into like specifically gene keys, which I know is your expertise, but what I was thinking during this is like it's very hard to dive deep into gene keys unless you're specifically analyzing somebody's gene keys. And
that's right.
so for everybody out there that's like, oh, they didn't really go into this, go talk to Dave, book a reading with Dave.
Thank you.
You will get the insights you're looking for because he is an expert in this domain and
Thank
just
you.
all the metaphysical, which that story is proof of. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I
Thanks,
mean,
Jack.
I'm really grateful for your time and for you coming on. And also, I want to give you an opportunity to share what programs and offerings do you have for people that are interested.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, I'm super honored. Thank you again for the opportunity to just sit and have a good conversation with you and get to know each other a little bit better. Um, yeah, so at my website, which is gentlemastorymethod.com, there are 4 options. The fourth option is a package of the first three, so I won't even talk about that. But those first 3 options really talk about there's a program that specifies from your gene keys how to let go of those limiting beliefs, a program that allows you to then, once you've sort of emptied out those beliefs and become sort of the empty vessel, fill that back up with who you actually are intentionally becoming, right? And then the third thing, which is it's actually an interesting exercise. So the first one's called the path of freedom. The second one's called the path of meaning. And the third one's called the path of abundance. And it's about abundance, but it's also pinpointing your personal brand and bless you, your personal brand. So the personal brand promise, what your brand product or service is, what your intended aligned target audience is. And all of this is in order to bring you aligned abundance. This is part of what I did and what I am still doing. So if you want to unlock any or all of that stuff for yourself, it's at gentlemasterymethod.com.
Incredible. And that will all be linked down below as well as Dave's social media, YouTube channel, etc.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I can't wait to do this again, and we can talk more about whatever it is that's up. So thank you again.
Yeah, this was one of the most fun episodes I can remember, and it's 8:08 right now, which is definitely an angel number for
There
me.
you go. That's perfect.
But yeah, this was super fun. I think people are gonna really enjoy this, and yeah, I'm excited for the part 2 whenever the stars align to tell us when to do it.
Yeah. You just go with whatever is right for your energy, and I know it'll be right for mine. So thanks very much, Jack.
Yes, thank you.